Steve Kornacki in at the monitor here for us now. I guess the headline of the numbers you're about to show us, what a difference a month and what a difference a tape can make.
Yeah, so you see, obviously, the 14-point lead, talking about that here, that's double what you saw a month ago. Sorry, I'm going to have to control it from this screen here. I think we blew a gasket in this. But the question, obviously, is what does this mean for the race for 270? So here's where it stands right now, and you see how close Hillary Clinton already is to 270. So if you're Donald Trump, here's what's essential for you to turn this thing around. First of all, you start in the state of North Carolina. This was a Romney state 4 years ago. He needs all the Romney states as his base. If he can't get North Carolina, he's not going to get to 270. So if he could get Carolina, that's a start. The next most important for him is always going to be Florida. 29 electoral votes. He has fallen behind in Florida in the last couple of weeks. And again, that is not even taking into account any damage from this tape. He's going to have to find a way to win Florida. You see, that would bring him closer. Next most important, Ohio. This is a state where he had the lead basically through September, started to slip again. Did the tape make the situation worse? Got to get Ohio. Would need to get Iowa. That's probably looked the best for him of all these toss-ups. Would need to get Nevada. There's some indications of slippage there. Still, he'd be short. The logical one here, we have New Hampshire as a toss-up right now. If he could get New Hampshire, you see, that would just hit him to 270. If not New Hampshire, where? Maybe Wisconsin. Pennsylvania's a real reach right now. Colorado's even more of a reach. Gets very hard to see where it is. He needs everything to break his way down the stretch.
Because it's a challenging map to start with. We've seen what's been happening in Congress, House Republicans, particularly in turmoil over what to do and how to respond to Trump. And you've got a figure from our poll that really lays out why that is.
Yeah, so again, and that, keep in mind, this poll is basically taken at the height of the controversy over the weekend, over the tape. But look at this. Who do you want to be to control Congress, Democrats or Republicans? It's 49-42 over the weekend. The significance here, this 7-point advantage for Democrats, biggest advantage they've had in this question since the government shutdown in 2013.
A month ago, it was 3 points.
Yeah. Come on, join us. Here we got Mark Halperin in as well. Paul Ryan, we know what he's doing. He's saying, hey, it almost like I'm going to concede the White House. I'm concentrating on saving the House. Is it because of those numbers right there?
It is, and it's because Paul Ryan looks and sees the real prospect of not just a President Clinton, but a Speaker Pelosi, a Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, and he cares about the policies that would be enacted. Paul Ryan does not object to Donald Trump because he's an outsider or because he's brash. He objects to Donald Trump because he thinks he's going to lose and because he doesn't believe that he's morally fit to be president. That leaves him in a very tough position. Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, does not relish challenging his party's nominee, but he does not want to see policies and liberal policies enacted.
Let's talk about Donald Trump and his approach right now, because since late August, for a few weeks there, he was gaining ground in the polls, and it's actually emblematic. It used to be people in his rallies would say, lock her up. And he would say, this started at the convention, he'd say, no, don't lock her up, let's vote. He's all in with lock her up right now. And does that suggest this is a new phase or a return to the old Donald Trump that we saw in the primary?
It suggests he's trying, in the short term, after the tape was released Friday, to survive. And the best way to survive politically is to go to your base in our polarized system. That's maybe a third of the country. It's nowhere near enough to win. But you've seized on the thing that is emblematic of what he's doing right now. Not trying to tell a majority of the country, here's what I do as president, but simply to rally people who hate the Clintons.
When it goes, going back to Paul Ryan trying to save the House here, Steve, he's counting on the fact that there are a significant number of people out there who know how to split the ballot, who say, I'm not going to vote for the Republican candidate for president, but I'm going to go down the ballot and I'm going to vote Republican for these House seats. What does history tell us about those voters?
History tells us we've started to live in a new era in the last decade, the last generation or so. It used to be easy for voters to do that. You'd see them vote for Reagan. You'd see them vote for Democrats for Congress. That has been happening less and less and less. So if you're Paul Ryan, if you're a Republican and you're thinking that way, you're hoping that this idea that Donald Trump is the exception to every rule we know about American politics extends to that congressional ballot.
Mark, we have been talking about our poll. Steve knows it well. I mean, so you have an 11-point, in a 4-point race, you have an 11-point gap between these two. But these polls have been volatile. This is just one poll. I assume we're going to see many more. Is there a legitimate and realistic chance for Trump to make up that kind of ground in 4 weeks?
Well, he'd have to win the third debate. He'd have to have some mistakes on the part of Hillary Clinton, maybe some more disclosures there. And I think he'd have to start talking about things besides the Clintons' personal life in a broader audience. Look, Steve points out the Electoral College, which is really, in the end, all that matters. He had a tough route before the videotape was released. He still has a very tough route. He needs no margin of error to win every state that's in play, and then he still barely gets there.
Briefly to both. You know, I was watching the debate Sunday night, and you know what I kept thinking? What are we in for over the next 4 years? No matter who wins, each of these candidates represents the very worst fear of the other party. So come January, February, March, what are we going to be facing?
I look at it this way. If Hillary Clinton wins, Republicans already think she's weak, and they will think it's essentially a fluke. Hey, she was faced with the one candidate she could possibly beat. So I think Republicans would go into her presidency smelling weakness.
There's every reason to be pessimistic, except Paul Ryan and some Senate Democrats share an agenda, tax reform, infrastructure. There's a possibility that out of the rubble of this result, we'll see some real activity next year and get the country back on track.
We can only hope. Yeah, Mark and Steve, thank you so much as always.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.